Hello and welcome. And in this video, I'm talking about how to attract perfect fit, high value leads with this content method that I'm about to deep dive into. But before I get into exactly what to do, I just want to frame this. Recently, I've been helping quite a number of clients kind of restructure their message on how they market themselves. And if I was going to put a number on this, I'd probably say about 95% of entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, business owners are faced with this same problem, which is how do we communicate in a way that when we market our business, we put either organic marketing posts, articles, content, videos out, or even ads, paid advertising campaigns. How do we get people to raise their hand? How do we get people to engage with us that at some point they're going to be a lead prospect and eventually be a client? And I thought, you know what, the best way for me to kind of share this is to give you guys an insight into what's possible. And this will work on any platform, whether you're marketing on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. It works across all the platforms, and I've tested it myself, and I've got clients who've also tested it. So when we get into content, one of the key things that we need to look at, well, who are we marketing to, right? And I'm not going to teach you the basics of niching, but what I am going to share with you is this important step, which is when we're marketing, you got to understand that we're not teaching, right? And at the very least, teaching is not our priority. It's not like the number one thing that we want to share. What we want to do is communicate a message that our audience understands us, right? And they understand us from the point of view that they read or they watch our content and they think, yeah, you understand where I am, meaning that there is empathy. Now, empathy is probably one of the biggest things that is misunderstood or not used at all, right? And here's generally what happens, and this is what I find quite a lot when it comes to marketing and correcting people's marketing campaigns, which is they go straight into, let me tell you what you need, right? And this is the worst thing, because when people are watching us, leads, our audience, our followers, they're not necessarily there to, kind of turn up and be taught. Because if anybody wants to learn something, and be told what they need, they only have to go onto YouTube or go onto, like TikTok or whatever and do some searches, and we'll come across the stuff, right? And there's endless amounts of articles and resources if you go and search on Google. So what's the solution? Well, the solution isn't to get into teaching per se. The solution is to get into storytelling. And this is where most people kind of get mixed up, right? They don't understand that storytelling is simply, imagine we met for the first time at a dinner party, and you said to me, Leon, tell me a bit about what you do. So rather than me boring you with what I do, how about if I start by saying to you, well, let me share a couple of stories from some clients that came to me, right? And just by the very nature of saying, hey, let me share a couple of stories of clients, you're going to be more inclined to listen to, me sharing the stories. And it's a very simple reason why. It's a psychological reason. Like if you think about being taught, most people can remember going to school, unless you were homeschooled. But we all have this memory and this experience of being taught, right? When you're taught, you've got to sit down, you've got to pay attention. It's kind of like formal. Yes, it can be informal, meaning you can be taught by being out in nature and different things. But generally, right, most of the Western society have been taught in a kind of classroom environment, let's say. Whereas if we tell a story, it's more relaxed. And rather than being switched on with our logical brain alone, when a story is shared, and you could probably remember this if you ever had a good teacher who would tell you stories rather than just teach you, right? And I'm sure everybody's got some kind of experience, grandparents, parents, just people who've always told you stories or, communicated with a story. Once a story is started, our emotional brain is allowed to be creative, and we push and put ourselves or place ourselves into the story. And this is the mistake that a lot of people are making when it comes to marketing their business. Now, if this is making sense, just let me know in a comment below, right? Because the difference between just putting content out that teaches and says, hey, here are the 3 steps or the 10 steps that you need to take if you want to be, like a 6-figure or 7-figure business owner, or here are the 5 steps you need to take if you want to learn how to create an irresistible offer. That's good. But how does that differentiate you, from the thousands of other people in the marketplace, competitors? And this is the thing that I'm talking about. Stories do. Stories are how you can create belief changes in your content, meaning changing the beliefs of the person who's consuming your content, watching your content, following you, so that they know it's possible to move from point A, where they are with the problem, to point B, where they want to be with what they desire as the outcome or result, right? But how do we get into the actual story structure? How do we get to the point where emotions are expressed, felt? People come across your content like it's the best thing since sliced bread, and it's kind of like, where have you been all my life? Like, that's what we all want, right? We want our audience to kind of fall in love with us even before they're a client. And if that happens, then it makes the job of actually presenting your offer and moving a person from being a lead to a prospect to being a client much easier. I'm sure you'd all agree. Isn't that what we all want? Right. So let me share a couple of ways that you can do that. What I want to focus on first of all is written, and then how you can use written formats like posts and articles, and then use that in your video content. And if this is making sense, first of all, guys, just give me a comment just saying making sense. I'd love to know, for those of you watching live, those of you watching on the replay. And it's a real sticky subject, because I'm going to give you a structure that you can use, and then I'm going to blow the structure up and throw it away. But first, I've got to give you the structure so you understand and you have an awareness as to what I'm going to share with you. And that way, you'll be able to at least step into a place when you come to creating your content with more awareness as to how to psychologically engage and persuade people to see that, you're the person that they should be looking at, that they should follow, and the one that, rather than should, the one that they've chosen to pursue and see if you can help them as a coach or consultant. So let's get into the structure. So first of all, if you're writing content, we've got the obvious things, which is usually like an article or a post. The headline is the key thing. The headline is usually called the hook. The reason being, it's kind of like the old fishing analogy. If you've got a rod with a fishing hook, you cast your hook out there with the bait, right? And that's usually what your headline is all about. A lot of people get mixed up when it comes to creating headlines, but the very simple headline, and it's actually one that I use in my book, which if you've never come across my book, it's called More Leads, More Clients. And I talk about creating headlines quite extensively. In particular, headlines that hook your audience on page or from page 67 onwards. You'll see there's some great examples, and I'm going to give you the best example of headlines to use out the gate. The how-to headline is probably one of the most popular ways to get people to pay attention to your content. And the reason for that is it usually suggests a solution, meaning here's how to. The next step from that is here's how I. And the cool thing about how I usually means that you're going to share something personal, i.e. story, just like I've been talking about. And then the next thing you've got is how made me, right? And so that's the way that you hook people, right? But where do we go from there once a person's like hooked, meaning they like the sound of whatever the headline is? A quick example of the hows are How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? One of the most popular and famous books, on the planet for entrepreneurs. It's the next step is the introduction. And basically what I'm going to be sharing with you as we get into this, it's more of a problem solution structure. And that's all this content is, right? But people just get it wrong, because what I tend to find is people who are kind of new into entrepreneurship as coaches and consultants, the ones who've been around 2 to 3 years, and they're still like trying to take their business to perhaps 10 to 15K a month and get there consistently, is the eagerness that they're trying to get a prospect like fast by giving them what they think they need, rather than entertaining them with the story, which is what's actually going to produce the outcome of what they're looking for. So the problem solution structure that I'm going to give you right now is very simple. Introduction. It should be the first few lines define the common problem faced by your niche, but you've got to engage the reader by identifying the pain point. But how do you do that? What's the best way? Talk about a personal story or a client story. Don't just talk about, hey, if you're currently frustrated with and you're experiencing this, change the angle, reframe it to, let me share a story of how my client Rob went through XYZ challenge and was faced with XYZ emotions and other problems, right? The difference is that rather than preaching to the person like you're teaching, you're now sharing a story, whether it's about you or a client, or even a third-party story if you don't have an exact story, but you can use a third-party story as a metaphor to share what you're trying to communicate. And the cool thing about this is you start to capture the reader's attention, right? And it works on video as well, but I'm just sharing from a written point of view. The next step from there is you dive into more of the problem. So that the whole point is that you're going to pique more of the interest by going into more of the pain, so that the person understands that you really understand what they're perhaps going through, right? And what you're doing here is evoking even more empathy and resonance with the reader, because it shows that you have depth of knowledge, right? The next step is empathy building. So what you want to do is the writer, you, the author, you're going to share personal experiences by diving in more. You're going to demonstrate exactly perhaps what you did with the client or you did with yourself. And you're also going to describe what's either going on internally or externally in their environment. So the person really knows, like, wow, like it's almost as if you've just, kind of peeled back the curtain or pulled back the curtain and you're talking about my life. Like that's how the reader should feel, like, wow, that's me. Like you've nailed it. And then at that point, once you kind of nailed, your empathy and you've gone into the point of understanding their environment and what you did, and you were able to come up with a solution, at that point you then elaborate on what the solution was. But you're not going to say, hey, my coaching program or consulting service. What you're going to do is talk about the method you used, right? So it's a big differentiation. Never go into your content and just say, hey, buy my coaching program, buy my consulting service. You're talking about the methods. And when I say the method, you're not even going to go into teaching. What you're going to do is break down probably a couple to like 5 key steps of what you did, because that way you trigger the logical side of your audience to say, hey, this guy or this woman is an authority. Surely they understand what they're doing. And you're doing that to make sure that the logical mind is appeased, right? Because the emotional mind is already engaged. And the next thing you're going to do then is talk about, after going through those steps, what was the success? What was the result that was achieved? And especially if you're talking about a client, it's social proof, because you're talking about a third party person who's gone through your process or experienced something that you've shared with them or helped them to achieve. And the reader is now putting themselves into the picture. They're already there creatively and in their mind, but now they're like, wow, maybe this is something that could work for me because I'm going through those same problems. And I think I can do those steps as well, right? So you're sharing the success of a client. You may even elaborate on a couple of other clients if you've got other testimonials and case studies. And at that point, that's the point where you can then open up the doors to whatever offer you have within your content. Whether you do have a program, a consulting service, you want to open up the opportunity for people to book a free strategy call with you. You have a lead magnet, or you have a paid type of product you just want to promote, and people can, request more information on that. And then finally, you're going to sign off as you as the author on that content. Now, here's what I really want to reveal about what I've just shared with you. Like constantly, you have to tell the story in a way that the reader sees themselves in the picture, right? Now, if you move to a place where you're teaching and let's say your content has a lot of questions, because I see this quite a lot where people create content to attract in clients and they're like, use these 5 questions or use these 2 questions, or they even ask a question in your content. Here's the problem that you're going to face. People are going to take the time to answer the question. And when they answer the question, that stops the flow of them reading what it is that you've got in your article or your content, right? Whereas what you want to do is write in an assumptive storytelling manner that keeps the flow and keeps the reader moving along with you, not stops them in their tracks, right? You can stop people, but you can still speak rhetorically. You can inject personality, humor, different things, that are unique to you. But the point is you use that structure to keep the movement, the rhythm of the reader getting through your content. If you use this kind of story format, this is where you're going to attract more people psychologically who engage with you. Now, do you get it right the first time? Like if you're working with for instance, copywriter, you've got somebody on your team who does social media content, make sure that they understand this process. And here's the cool thing, make sure you understand this process and you get into it. And the reason being, if you want your content to become stronger, that means you've got to put in the reps. You need more experience. You need more cycles of going through the process. So for example, if you wanted to be a great podcaster, you probably need to do 100 plus interviews, right? And it's something I've done. I've done about 400 plus interviews on podcasting. If you want to get better at the gym, what do? You go to the gym and you put more reps in with the exercises that you need to do to build the muscles that you're trying to affect, right? And it's the same thing with copy. If you delegate copy, and especially if you're the person who understands in your business as the business owner or the main coach or consultant that you deliver the services to your clients for, maybe you do have a team, but like you're the strategist, the person who thinks at that higher level, then when it comes to content, you've literally got to have your finger on the pulse of content, because if you don't, you delegate too soon, and the people you delegate to are usually not as experienced or have the insight or the intricacy of story and the things that need to be shared to emotionally engage your audience. It doesn't exist. And I see this so often where people, I've got a social media manager on my team and I've got a copywriter, But remember, they're only as good as the depth of understanding that they have. And I see so many times where people are like, oh, I'm doing really well now. I've got a social media marketer. I'm paying them each month. But actually, they're not shifting. They're not generating any more leads because the person is creating content to the depth and the level of their knowledge. Whereas actually you as the owner, you usually have that extra insight. Now, it's different if that person's been working alongside you. They've seen perhaps your clients and they've had more insight into some of those client stories, case studies, and have a real depth of understanding of what's gone on with them. And this is another way that you can actually get to the point where you delegate this process. But if you put the reps in initially, what you're going to do is build up a content strategy that becomes predictable, that becomes reliable, that generates leads consistently. Now, what do I mean by that? If you follow this process, right, and you keep putting in the reps, it's kind of like if you went to the gym. Like I go to the gym, I go to jiu-jitsu, right? So these are some of my hobbies. The more I go to gym, the more I go to the and do jiu-jitsu, the better I get, right? It's true with everything, and I'm sure you guys understand this, right? So then if we look at content and copy, it isn't a matter of let me delegate and not take responsibility for this. It's let me review, let me analyze, let me reflect on what worked, what could be improved, right? And so what I like to do, and one of the things that I teach my clients, right, is to use a 6-week content rhythm. So what you do is every week in a 6-week period, you pick a key frustration, desire, and a limiting belief that you know your audience have. You go through the 6 weeks, so every week is different, and then you go back to week 1, right? And it's a really cool process because what you're doing is not going wide and shallow, but you're going narrow and deep. Narrow and deep is how you become an authority within your niche, right? So if you're watching earlier and I said, I'm going to give you that structure for creating content, great. So here's the other way now. And this is the one where I said, I'm going to blow it up and just throw it away as well. When you've got to the point that you understand how to structure your content and you understand with awareness how to inject empathy, how to structure stories, how to get people to raise their hand by injecting value into your call to actions to make it so that it becomes irresistible. Eventually, because you've put in enough reps, you will have gotten to the place of, let's say, mastery, right? Where you've put in your 10,000 hours, which is the common kind of number that's given for you to achieve mastery. There's a point where, because you've stepped into this place of understanding the structure, you've made the structure your own now, because you are able to tailor things to the way that you like to write, you like to record and appear on video. Now, here's the cool thing. When you get to that stage, you are the niche, you are the structure, right? But you can only get there by putting in the reps. Now, for example, the structure that I've given you guys just a moment ago, this is something I've been using for about 3 years. And now I can actually write content without using the structure I've just given you. I don't have to like refer back to anything. Oh, what am I missing? I already know how to create the content, right? Because I've put in the reps specifically with this method that I've just shared with you. And this is where you want to be. Now, if you're at the stage where your business is at this kind of 10 to 30K per month level and you're not shifting anywhere forward or you're kind of stuck, like this is your sign that you need a new structure so you can put the reps in to go beyond that, to achieve mastery, to go to that next level. And that's how you'll attract perfect fit, high value leads with your content. And the reason being because you'll be speaking their language. You know, if you're attracting broke people right now, it's because of your message, it's because of your content. It isn't because that's what's in the market. If you're attracting people who aren't quite a fit in terms of your values and your beliefs, it's because of your content, it's because of your message. If you're attracting people full stop who you really just would not like to, you know, engage at all, it's because of your message and your content, right? Success leaves clues, and so do your results. Your results are an outcome, i.e. cause and effect of what it is that you're doing with your message and your brand. So the conclusion and what I want to leave you with is, if you're not attracting the right type of people, first thing is to, you know, fully be aware of what it is that you need to understand about your niche. Do you even understand who your niche is, right? And I come across it time and time again, even established businesses where they're like, yeah, we understand our niche, but you know, they've never actually gone back to reviewing who their niche is and understanding the key parts of what makes up their niche. And when it comes to niche, it isn't just a set of demographics or psychographics. It's your who they are plus what the exact problem is that you help them to fix. And it's a merger between the two where either your who is super tight or your what the problem is super tight. And that's where most people go wrong. So rather than going wide, what you need to do is go narrow and deep. And once you've got that, that's where you can then channel the message, the understanding and identity of your niche into your marketing. Because after all, your marketing is only as good as your understanding of who it's intended for, meaning your niche. And if you don't understand them, trust me, when they come across your content, they're not going to understand you. And that's the bottom line. So hopefully, guys, you can use that structure in order to attract more perfect fit leads with your content. If you want some examples or you'd like to get access to my 6-week content rhythm method, I do have a PDF and a walkthrough video that you can get for free. Just comment below this video with the words 6 weeks and I'll reach out to you and send you the free download link. On that note, I just want to say, guys, thank you very much for watching this video and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.